Empire? That is a question that originated in an online trend in which people, mostly women, were asking other people, mostly men, how often they thought about the Roman Empire. To my surprise, a lot of people admitted to thinking about the Roman Empire 2 to 3 times a week. They were mostly men. And those men, I dare postulate, ironically, might not really vibe with this movie. And surprisingly, me, someone who hardly ever thinks about the Roman Empire, found this film to be incredibly timely. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for checking out my video. My name is Emily, or La Movie Mija. I'm a part-time filmmaker, full-time movie lover, and this is my review of Gladiator 2. Let's get into it. After his home is conquered by the tyrannical emperors who now lead Rome, Lucius is forced to enter the Colosseum and must look to his past to find strength to return the glory of Rome to its people. The film is directed by Ridley Scott and it stars Paul Mescal, Pedro Pascal, Denzel Washington, Connie Nielsen, Fred Hechinger, Joseph Quinn, and many more. In a time when all the top performing films are either sequels, requels, and reboots, oh my! Gladiator 2 finds itself in a unique position of being a little bit of everything. It's definitely a direct sequel to its predecessor from 24 years ago, so I was understandably suspicious when I saw that we were revisiting Gladiator 2. Like, of course, the easy answer is, this is a cash grab. Why would 86-year-old Ridley Scott want to revisit his critically acclaimed work, rebuild the Colosseum, spend 51 shooting days to make an epic seemingly out of nowhere? Well, to my surprise, Ridley Scott actually turns 87 this week, and he didn't simply just remake Gladiator. He made a movie that deepens and complicates the themes of legacy and honor, and even goes so far as to turn its gaze on the first film to ask, is Rome even worth fighting for? Narratively, the movie doesn't go anywhere too unexpected, and that's where like the requel classification comes in. It kind of feels a little dated, but in a good way. The familiar story beats and the classical character arcs make it feel like you're watching a movie from a different time. My first point of reference was equating this to like channel surfing back in 2005 and seeing this on TBS. If I saw this on TBS, I would be locked in. I'd be sat. Granted, I would probably be first intrigued by the beautiful cast, but I would stay for the entertainment punch this film packs. In addition to the cast being objectively hot, everyone in this movie is bringing something unique to the table. Paul Mescal is beefed up and vicious in the arena, but can't help but be charming everywhere else. Pedro Pascal is perfection, but definitely underutilized. Joseph Quinn and Fred Hechinger are doing exactly what they need to be doing as the power-hungry, spoiled emperor brothers. In an interview, Fred Hechinger actually revealed that him and Ridley Scott were talking about like character inspirations for the two brothers, and Beavis and Butthead were actually a point of reference. And you know what? I can see it, and it works. And Denzel Washington. Denzel brings a special sauce to the mix. He elevates the entire film with his grandiose brand of swagger. I did not care that he did not speak in the same accent as everyone else because they were all speaking English in a movie about ancient Rome. Okay, get over it. He did exactly what he needed to do. And he milked every single scene he was in. Like every single movement, every single line delivery was locked in, and he was performing at a level that was so entertaining. The set pieces are epic, and there's a bigness to this film that just oozes 2000s action films. The film is beautifully shot, and there are so many fight sequences. Like, this is capital A action, okay? But even then, the film keeps finding new ways to raise the stakes and up the ante with the action. So you have familiar story beats, you have classical characters, but where the film gets a little surprising is thematically. It almost seems as if the film is challenging the resurgence of reverence for the Roman Empire like we've seen with the online trend. Each character has distinct motivations, bringing them to war and pushing them to violence, and through them we cast a wide representation of masculinity and a variety of thoughts around the consequences of imperialism, making for a very unexpected journey for someone like me who came to see hot guys fighting. I don't know enough about the man to know if this is true, and I don't want to overinflate and give him too much credit, but it almost feels as if Ridley Scott was like fed up with people over romanticizing the idea of ancient Rome and decided to make a movie challenging that romanticized vision. A movie that is offering an antithesis to this like glorified vision of imperialistic Rome. Overall, Gladiator 2 is an exciting, if predictable, popcorn movie with just enough spice to make you feel very well fed when you're leaving the theater. I suggest you watch this in the biggest format possible, IMAX if you can, because it is really a fun time. And can I just mention again that the man is turning 87 this week. Happy birthday, Ridley Scott. It's Sagittarius season, and between Kendrick and Wicked and now Gladiator 2, it's just a really good time for everybody. already. Before we get into some spoilers and analysis, I'd like to remind you to please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you are enjoying spending some time with me. I post a new movie review every single week, and sometimes I even take you to the movies with me. And for even more movie news, reviews, and personal insights, you can follow me at Movie Mija on TikTok and Instagram. All right, let's talk spoilers. I only bring up Ridley's age because I was thoroughly impressed by the invigorating energy with which he approached this project. Not only was it thoroughly entertaining, equally action and dialogue packed, but I found it to be surprisingly introspective. Gladiator 2 walks a tight line between feeling dated and being fully a lot of fun to watch in IMAX, no less. It was a baffling movie-going experience for me because the movie follows fairly predictable story beats, even mirroring some of the arcs from the first film, but that central question of, is Rome even worth fighting for, allows for an intriguing layer of discovery. The setting of ancient Rome is a fantasy in this movie, okay? Like, do not come for historical accuracies. You already know I wasn't there for that. It's a sandbox for the action. Ridley Scott is not preoccupied with telling you the truth of what happened, and that's a strength in this case. Because the less you focus on whether or not there were actually sharks in the Colosseum or newspapers and cafes in ancient Rome, the more you can focus on the themes and the criticism of the consequences of imperialism. Speaking of those Colosseum fights, I just need to say those were a lot of fun. I was concerned for the rhino. I know the rhino was fully CGI, but it was really hard to watch him be in so much pain, and I needed to turn away. Like, that was so vicious. And no, there weren't any sharks in the Colosseum, but there were actual naval battles that they had within the gladiator fights. That's kind of crazy. Every single sequence raised the stakes, raised the ante. The action was so well choreographed and so well shot, and it was really entertaining to watch. When we look at the differences between the characters, we can see the distinct molds that make up their moral compasses, and that makes for interesting contrasts. You have Lucius, who is pure rage, seeking vengeance against a system that killed his wife. Fridging the wife, something we did in Gladiator 1, but not the point. Now, there's some chitter chatter that Paul Mescal was like miscast for this role. And I just want to point out that I simply do not agree. If this movie is presenting an argument against the romanticization of Rome, it would make sense that this vengeful tunnel vision protagonist presents not as a typical alpha male. Outside of the arena, he is so charming. But in the arena, specifically, once we see him showdown with those monkeys, he is vicious. He is vengeful. He is rage embodied, and he is so scary. But he's not that same person outside of the arena, so I understand how some people might not feel like he is the embodiment of rage throughout the film. But being a gladiator who can also recite some poetry is a very intriguing trait, and I can kind of see what Ridley Scott was going for with him. He's not meant to be Russell Crowe. He is a wholly new character, even though he is following some of the same beats. Speaking of Russell Crowe, I don't know if I really needed this movie to be so connected to the first one. I've been rewatching Cobra Kai, and they do a lot of like flashbacks to things when we need them, like very convenient flashbacks to let us know exactly what we should be paying attention to within the plot. And Gladiator 2 does a little bit of that Cobra Kai flashback like convenience for its audience, which I appreciate. But in the end, I'm not sure if I actually needed Paul Mescal to be like the direct like connection to the last film. It felt too easy, but if you thought that was easy, there's a lot more very convenient things that happen throughout this film. Back to his motivations. So he's conflating Pedro Pascal's character of Marcus to be associated with that system, and so he sets his eyes on getting revenge through Marcus. And Marcus is war-worn. He is weary, and the scars of war are consuming his soul. He sees the way the emperors rule, and he is understandably questioning their leadership. He is the conscience of the film, asking the question, is Rome even worth fighting for? And his performance is so perfect. I don't know anybody who could ever say that this is not the exactly type of role that Pedro Pascal should be in. And I find it interesting that he has kind of marketed himself as like a very kind and loving and like safe for women to be around kind of man. And I would go as far as to say that a lot of these cast members have like created that kind of persona about them. So it's interesting seeing that Ridley Scott would take these types of men and how they operate outside in the like real world and put them in this very violent arena. The casting alone makes me curious for the kinds of stories and themes that we're trying to get at within this film. But yeah, I found his performance to be very compelling. He just really sells it for me as a general, and his death is quite compelling. I think they really nailed that scene and that connection. You get to see that turning point in which Lucius, Paul Mescal's Lucius, is able to separate the general, the man before him, from the powers that be that put him in that place to carry out the violence of imperialism. And then we have Maximus. Maximus is seeking his own revenge. The turn that we get with him was so surprising and so delicious. I was like, who am I even rooting for at this point? But he chooses to do it in a way that perpetuates that broken system that bred his rage. It was revealed that he was also enslaved himself, but that doesn't deter him from using slavery to enforce his own self-serving plans. He is a blockbuster star. He is like operating on all cylinders, and it is very jarring at first, but once you see him like cook, you're like, let him do it. I'm here for this. Some of his scenes even seem improvised, and all of his mannerisms are very modern, but in the end, I don't care. I don't care one bit. He is having fun, and in turn, I'm having fun watching him. He really draws you in, and it makes that turn when he is revealed to be conspiring against our protagonist to be quite the surprise. Lucilla in this movie reminded me a lot of Lily Bass from Gossip Girl, Serena van der Woodson's mom. There are a lot of Gladiator overlapping moments in that show.
No, this is Constance. This is about our legacy. What we do here today echoes through eternity.
Lucilla is elegant and stunning, and I loved her dynamic with Maximus. No, what's his name? Marcus? She's lived under the leadership of these awful men, and she's had to endure in these many years. And because she is a woman who is in love with the man, who is having that great debate of whether or not it is worth it to even fight for Rome anymore, she becomes the embodiment of like all of those broken promises, and having to endure under those awful leaders for so long just makes her a very heartbreaking character, especially being someone who is a direct continuation from the first film. She is like the biggest connective tissue, being someone who is in both films. Now, before I get to the ending, I do want to address the controversy with Calamawy, the Palestinian-Egyptian actress whose scenes were all cut from the film. Originally, she was touted as one of the leading actresses in the film. They had put out a huge casting call and found her for this big role that she was supposed to have in this film. But in the end, we only see her regaled to being a background character who is next to Denzel Washington's character throughout the film with no speaking lines at all. Now, there hasn't been any confirmation about why this happened or, what led to her scenes being cut. She wasn't present throughout the film's promotion, and she didn't attend the film premiere itself. And she hasn't said anything about this either. Now, her scenes could have been cut for a number of reasons. I mean, the runtime itself is already pretty long. The story is already pretty complicated. And it's not like this doesn't happen in other instances. Pedro Pascal did post some behind the scenes photos of her on set to kind of show she was here. And in a way, he hasn't shied away from speaking up for Palestinians in general. So I appreciate that he made sure that she wasn't forgotten from this experience, even though her scenes didn't make it into the final film. All right, let's talk about that ending, because I really do appreciate a film that is not afraid to end with a single one-on-one battle instead of a big, huge, epic battle. We got a lot of fighting in this movie already. We started with a huge battle. We got a lot of different fight scenes within the Colosseum, outside of the Colosseum. We got some really cool assassination work, like Denzel. How in a movie with so much violence did they still make that scene so particularly violent? But I like that we get a one-to-one combat with Lucius and Maximus. Thinking about the visuals that we got of the afterlife throughout the film, that's something that was also present in Gladiator 1, these visions of the afterlife. And in this film, we see it represented through the river Styx. We saw it when his wife passed away and she was carried across the river. We saw visions of the river when he felt like he was close to death throughout the film. So putting this scene in a body of water where water has been seen to be connected to the transition from life to afterlife throughout the film was a direct representation of these men accepting that they are willing to die for their causes. And of course, you have Lucius wearing Russell Crowe's armor, and it is just stabbing the thing that is protecting him from those fatal blows until he is able to emerge from the water victorious and prevents a greater battle from breaking out, prevents even further loss of life, which was a main theme throughout the film about whether or not it was worth it to sacrifice all of these men, whether it be for entertainment, whether it be for imperialistic motivations. So I appreciate a film that is asking that question about whether or not it's worth it to fight for Rome, is it decides not to subject these armies to go head to head and create even more loss of life in the name of imperialism. Because if all parties are willing to fight for Rome and die for Rome, it would be antithetical for them to fight against each other. Now, the film, of course, is not without its faults. There are a lot of things that are just so convenient. Like, what are the chances Lucius was a good fighter? That he would show up back in Rome? That one servant overheard the right piece of information to mess everything up? Chismosa. But there is enough visceral grit in the stunt work, the camera work, the commentary on unchecked power, that in the end, I didn't care too much because I was engaged, enthralled, and yes, entertained. But what did you think about Gladiator 2? Let me know in the comments below. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!